"You're no longer my daughter." The words hung in the air like broken glass, sharp and irreversible. My father stood in my apartment doorway, his face purple with rage, waiting for me to break down, to beg for his forgiveness like I used to as a child. Instead, I smiled. "That's fine. You have another daughter anyway, don't you?" The shock that flashed across his face was almost comical. For 25 years, he'd hidden his secret so carefully, and now it lay exposed like a wound in broad daylight. I opened the door wider and gestured for him to leave. When he did, I closed it firmly behind him, leaving him standing in the hallway. 3 months earlier, I never could have imagined it would come to this. My name is Sophia, and my childhood was painted in gold. Our house could have graced magazine covers with its spacious rooms and manicured lawn. The pool hosted countless summer parties where my father would hold court, his business success radiating from every expensive detail. I remember floating on an inflatable raft, watching him through chlorine-stung eyes as he laughed with guests, his voice carrying that familiar mix of pride and authority. "Sophia, honey, remember that everything we have comes from hard work," he would say, his hand heavy on my shoulder. I'd nod solemnly, though at 8 years old, I was more interested in the elaborate swan-shaped pool float than life lessons. Hard work seemed abstract when everything appeared so effortless. My cousin Chloe was my constant companion in those golden days. Technically Uncle Mark's daughter, but she felt more like the sister I never had. Just a year younger, she had this way of lighting up any room with her infectious laugh. We were inseparable, sharing clothes, secrets, and dreams with the careless intimacy of childhood. But even then, something felt off about the family dynamics. I remember watching from my bedroom window as Dad helped Chloe out of his car after their special shopping trips together. She'd be carrying bags from expensive stores, her face glowing with excitement. When I asked why I couldn't go on these trips, Mom would smooth her hand over my hair and say, "Your father just wants to make sure Chloe feels included. Her family doesn't have the same advantages we do." The diplomatic explanation made sense to my young mind, but the feeling lingered like a splinter under the skin. "Your uncle's family needs our support," Mom would explain whenever I noticed Dad slipping Uncle Mark another check. "Family takes care of family." She was always the peacemaker, smoothing over awkward moments with her gentle smile and reasonable explanations. Looking back, I wonder if she was convincing me or herself. During high school, as Chloe and I planned our future sprawled across my bedroom floor, the dreams felt so achievable. "We'll go to college together," Chloe would say, staring at my ceiling where I'd stuck glow in the dark stars. "Then we'll live in apartments next to each other, and our kids will be best friends too." The certainty in her voice made it feel like destiny rather than hope. When graduation approached, Dad's announcement about paying for both our educations felt like the natural order of things. "Both my girls deserve the best education possible," he declared at our joint graduation party, his arms around both of us. I watched Chloe's eyes well up with tears of gratitude, while I simply smiled, accepting it as my birthright. How naive I was to think love was distributed equally in our family. College passed in a blur of shared experiences and parallel dreams. Chloe and I decorated our dorm rooms across the hall from each other, certain that nothing could ever come between us. "Nothing can ever come between us, right, Sophia?" she'd ask, and I'd promise, with all the conviction of youth, nothing. If only I could go back and warn that girl about the cracks already forming in our perfect foundation. Armed with my marketing degree, I quickly landed a job at a prestigious firm. The future stretched out before me like an open highway. Everything seemed to be falling into place until the evening I brought up moving out. "Dad, I've been thinking about getting my own place," I mentioned over dinner, my voice casual despite the hours I'd spent browsing apartment listings online. The rental market was brutal, but I was ready to take the next step into true independence. He put down his fork with a decisive clink. "Sophia, you're an independent woman now. You have a good job. It's time for you to earn your own living." The words hit me like cold water. Mom nodded in agreement, her support of his decision absolute and unquestioning. I felt something shift inside me, a recognition that I was alone in a way I'd never experienced before. That's how I ended up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, watching my savings grow at a glacial pace while half my paycheck disappeared into rent. But I was determined to prove I could stand on my own feet, just like Dad insisted. A year later, at Chloe's graduation celebration, she flashed a diamond ring with the excitement of someone who'd never doubted good things would come her way. "Jake proposed," she squealed. "We're getting married in 4 months." I threw myself into maid of honor duties, helping her choose everything from her dress to the centerpieces. Despite my own housing struggles, I was genuinely happy for her. Her joy was infectious, and planning her perfect day became a welcome distraction from my own daily grind. The wedding day arrived in a cascade of silk and flowers. Everything was flawless, from the ceremony to the reception. I watched Chloe dance with Jake, both of them radiating happiness so pure it made my chest ache with emotion. When Dad stood to make his speech, I settled back with my champagne, expecting the usual sentimental words about watching his niece grow up. "Chloe," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "you've been like a daughter to me all these years. Watching you grow up alongside Sophia has been one of life's greatest joys." Standard wedding speech material. I smiled and sipped my champagne. "That's why," he continued, pulling out an envelope with theatrical flair, "I want to give you something special. Something to start your new life together." He paused, and the entire room held its breath. "The keys to your very own apartment." The champagne glass nearly slipped from my hand. The room erupted in gasps and applause, while my world tilted sideways. I sat frozen as relatives crowded around Chloe and Jake, congratulating them on this incredible gift. My mind was spinning in circles, trying to reconcile the father who told me to stand on my own feet with the one now basking in the glow of his generosity toward my cousin. "I love you like my own daughter," he declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. The words cut deeper than any knife could have. Like my own daughter. Not as much as his actual daughter, apparently. I maintained my smile throughout the rest of the reception, playing my part as the supportive maid of honor. This was Chloe's day, and I wouldn't ruin it with my own complicated feelings. But inside, something fundamental had broken. 3 days later, I stood on my parents' doorstep with shaking hands but a steady voice. "We need to talk," I said, walking past Dad into the familiar living room where so many family meetings had taken place. "What's on your mind, Sophia?" he asked, settling into his favorite armchair with infuriating calm. "Really? You're going to pretend you don't know? I remained standing, too agitated to sit. You told me to earn my own living, to stand on my own feet, but you just handed Chloe an apartment like it was nothing. Want to explain that? His sigh was heavy with condescension. It's different with Chloe. She doesn't have the same opportunities you do. Different how? We went to the same college, got the same education, which you paid for, by the way. She comes from a poor family, Sophia. Jake's family isn't well off either. Your uncle can't afford to help them get started in life. He leaned forward, as if explaining something obvious to a child. At today's prices, they'd never be able to save enough for their own place. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, and I can? Half the country rents, Dad. They could have done what I'm doing, work, save, rent an apartment like normal people. His composed facade cracked. You're being mercenary. This isn't about you. This is my money, and I decide how to spend it. I help your uncle's family because they need it. Mercenary? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. This isn't about money. It's about fairness. How do you think it feels to watch you treat your niece better than your own daughter? That's when Mom burst into the room, her face already flushed with anger. How dare you question your father's decisions? You have no right to tell him how to spend his money. I turned to face her, this woman who had always smoothed over every conflict. Oh, so you're okay with this? Your husband giving another woman's daughter an apartment while telling his own to struggle? Don't you take that tone with me, young lady, Mom snapped. Your father has provided everything for you, and this is how you repay him? With jealousy and demands? The word hit me like a slap. Jealousy? You think this is about jealousy? This is about respect. About treating your own child with the same consideration you show to others. Dad's voice cut through the air like ice. Get out. Until you can appreciate everything we've done for you and apologize for this behavior, get out of my house. I grabbed my purse with hands that trembled with rage. Gladly. And don't worry about doing anything else for me. I wouldn't want your charity. As I drove away with tears of anger burning my eyes, I realized this wasn't really about the money. It never had been. It was about watching my father bend over backward for Chloe while telling me to toughen up. It was about feeling like a stranger in my own family. 5 years can reshape a person completely. I built my career methodically, rising to senior account manager at my marketing firm. I saved money with the discipline of someone who'd learned not to count on family support. Most importantly, I found Michael during a client meeting where he was the creative director. Something clicked between us instantly, a recognition that felt like coming home. When he proposed on a random Tuesday, while we were cooking dinner together, I knew I'd finally found someone who put me first without conditions or comparisons. Wedding planning consumed me with a different kind of energy than Chloe's had. This was my day, my choices, my future. The guest list decisions came easily once I accepted that some bridges had been burned beyond repair. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Chloe since her nasty Facebook message. You're just jealous because I have a husband and an apartment while you have neither. Grow up, Sophia. Maybe if you weren't so entitled, you'd have both by now. I'd blocked her after that. Cleaner that way. But families have their own gravitational pull, even broken ones. When Dad's name appeared on my phone screen for the first time in 5 years, my heart hammered against my ribs. Sophia, His voice sounded older, more tired. I hear congratulations are in order. Who told you? My voice was steadier than I felt. Does it matter? Why didn't you invite me to your wedding? I'm your father. I should be the one walking you down the aisle. The bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Really? Now you want to play the father card? Sophia, actually, I'm curious. I cut him off, feeling reckless. Something about hearing his voice had unleashed 5 years of carefully contained emotions. Will you be giving me an apartment as a wedding gift? You know, like you did for Chloe. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he cleared his throat. Look, sweetheart, business hasn't been great lately. I can give you 5,000 for the wedding. That's a generous gift. You should be grateful. $5,000. After giving Chloe an entire apartment, the familiar burn of indignation rose in my throat. Thanks for your generosity, Dad, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. But keep your money. I don't need it. I hung up before he could respond. The next morning brought a notification that made my stomach clench. Robert Anderson has shared a post. My father rarely used social media, so seeing his name was jarring enough before I even read the content. I never thought I'd have to write something like this about my own daughter, but Sophia has shown her true colors. She's demanding an apartment as a wedding gift, threatening not to invite me to her wedding unless I comply. The selfishness and mercenary attitude she's displaying breaks my heart. What happened to the daughter I raised? The comments poured in like poison. How ungrateful can she be? Some people never appreciate what they have. You can't demand gifts like that. My fingers flew across the keyboard before rational thought could stop me. A matter of principle, I typed. You gave my cousin an apartment for her wedding. Your own daughter deserves the same consideration, or at least an explanation for the difference in treatment. But the avalanche of judgment had already started. Something snapped inside me as I watched strangers dissect my character based on his carefully crafted narrative. I opened a new post and began typing words that would change everything. Let me tell you all a story that's been bothering me for years. It's about a father who has always treated his niece better than his own daughter. Let me list the ways. Every birthday, Chloe got lavish parties while mine were simple family gatherings. When we went on family trips abroad, Dad always took Chloe shopping separately, buying her extras I never got. Her pocket money was consistently double mine. Dad paid for her education, which I appreciate he did for both of us. He gave her an apartment as a wedding gift while telling me to stand on my own feet. At Chloe's wedding, she had her first dance with my father instead of her own. And you know what? The more I think about it, the more suspicious this whole situation seems. I wouldn't even be surprised if it turned out Chloe was actually my father's daughter. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. The words stared back at me from the screen. A nuclear bomb dropped into the middle of our family's carefully maintained facade. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, half the family had announced they wouldn't attend my wedding. Mom called first, her voice shrill with panic. How could you do this? You have any idea what you've done to this family? Your father is devastated. Dad's call was pure rage. You're destroying the family name with these sick accusations. You're dead to me. But Uncle Mark remained notably silent throughout the chaos. That silence spoke louder than all the angry voices combined. 2 months of wedding preparations passed in a blur of revised guest lists and canceled catering numbers. Michael stood by me through every ugly phone call and deleted relationship, never once questioning my decision to burn bridges for the sake of truth. Then came that rainy evening when Uncle Mark appeared at my door, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. "We need to talk." He sat heavily on my couch, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Your post," he began slowly, "about your father's treatment of Chloe. It made me start thinking. Really thinking about everything. And remembering. What came next shattered the last illusions I'd held about our family. Uncle Mark told me about the early years of his marriage, how my father was always around their house. He'd drive Aunt Sarah home from work, saying it wasn't safe for her to take the bus. This was even before she was pregnant with Chloe. He was always bringing her gifts, expensive ones. "I thought he was just being a generous brother," Uncle Mark whispered, his voice cracking. "God, I was such a fool." The DNA test results he pulled from his jacket were printed on official laboratory letterhead. He'd collected hair samples from all three of them himself, Chloe and my father. The numbers were unequivocal. Uncle Mark showed only an uncle's relationship to Chloe, while my father showed a 99.99% paternal match. "Sarah confessed everything today," he said. 25 years. They've been having an affair for 25 years, since before Chloe was even conceived. We sat in my living room until well past midnight, piecing together memories that suddenly made horrifying sense. The special treatment, the excessive gifts, the way my father always seemed to know about Chloe's life before anyone else. All those times he'd insisted on driving Aunt Sarah to doctor's appointments when she was pregnant. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," Uncle Mark said as he prepared to leave. "I should have seen it, should have known." I watched him walk to his car through the rain, his shoulders hunched under the weight of 25 years of betrayal. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt no satisfaction in being right. The next morning brought a text from Mom. "Sophia, your uncle just left. We need to talk. Can you meet me at Rosemary's Cafe in an hour?" I found her in a corner booth, hands wrapped around an untouched cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her hands were shaking slightly. "I filed for divorce," she said before I could even sit down. "I just came from the lawyer's office." Her voice cracked like dried earth. 25 years of marriage and I never knew. Never wanted to know, maybe. Uncle Mark had told her everything: the DNA test results, Sarah's confession, the decades-long affair. He'd filed for divorce too, unable to remain married to a woman who'd built their entire life on a lie. "Sophia," Mom reached across the table and grabbed my hands, her eyes brimming with tears. "I owe you the biggest apology. All these years, I defended him. I agreed with him. I watched him favor Chloe and told myself it was nothing. I should have listened to you. Should have seen what was happening in my own home." We spent hours in that cafe, crying and talking, beginning the slow process of rebuilding what had been broken. Mom ordered a bottle of wine, and we shared it as she told me about all the signs she'd ignored over the years, all the moments that suddenly made terrible sense. Later that evening, someone started pounding on my door with enough force to rattle the frame. I opened it to find my father, his face purple with rage, pushing past me into my apartment. "Are you happy now?" he shouted. "You've destroyed everything. 2 families destroyed because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." "I destroyed nothing," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "You did this 25 years ago. You made a choice that would destroy these families." I just exposed the truth. His face twisted with something ugly. "Well, I won't be at your wedding." "How's that for truth?" "I wasn't planning to invite you," I said quietly. "You haven't been a real father to me in years." "Then it's settled," he snarled. "You're no longer my daughter." Which brings us back to that moment in my doorway, the moment I finally understood that some relationships are built on foundations too rotten to save. "That's fine," I told him, opening the door wider. "You have another daughter anyway, don't you?" When Uncle Mark agreed to walk me down the aisle, his voice cracked with emotion. "Sophia, I would be honored." The wedding was smaller than originally planned, but every person there had chosen truth over comfortable lies. Mom sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes as Uncle Mark took my arm. The garden venue was scattered with white roses and peonies, and everything felt exactly as it should be. Mom's divorce settlement was finalized quickly. Dad agreed to everything, perhaps hoping to minimize the scandal. When she handed me the check for the full $200,000, I couldn't stop the tears. "I don't need this money," she said, squeezing my hand. "What I need is for my daughter to have the home she deserves. Consider it compensation for all the years I failed to stand up for you." Every time I unlock the door to our beautiful 3-bedroom apartment with its balcony and space for the family we're hoping to start, I feel justice being served in the most practical way possible. Dad and Aunt Sarah got married last month. I heard about it through the family grapevine. They didn't even wait for the ink to dry on their respective divorce papers. Their social media is full of happy couple photos, as if the past 25 years of deception never happened. Most of our relatives sided with Mom and me once the DNA results became public knowledge. Even those who initially defended Dad couldn't ignore scientific evidence. Uncle Mark comes over for dinner every Sunday now, tentatively dating again and slowly rebuilding his life. Mom joins us often, and watching them heal together has been beautiful. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Chloe, about the fact that she's technically my half-sister. I wonder if she knew, if she ever suspected the truth behind our father's favoritism. But those thoughts don't keep me awake anymore. I have my own life now, my own home, my own family built on honesty instead of secrets. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually, no matter how deep you bury it. And sometimes, the most destructive thing you can do to a lie is simply to speak it out loud.